Now that we've got all of the hard stuff out of the way, we're ready to start coding. We've got our index page opened up, and let's write some code within the index page. So we want to set up an event trigger. So usually this is a good way to trigger off an AJAX request. So let's set that up, give it an ID, and we'll just get all rates. So we'll just give it an ID of all rates, a value of see all. And we also need to create an output area. So I'm going to create an unordered list and give it an ID of output. So there we go. So that's it for our HTML. We're not going to do too much with HTML, and we're also not going to do a whole lot with our styling. So we're going to keep it really plain and simple and focused on the core of what this lesson is all about, and that's about making AJAX requests and making HTTP requests and returning back JSON data and then outputting that JSON data. So let's set up our script, and we're going to add the script tags within the same page as well. I'm going to put some spaces in there so that it moves up. So we're ready to write our script content. So first of all, let's set up our event handler. So do a variable, and we're going to grab all rates, document. Now let's do query selector. So you could obviously, of course, do also get element by ID as well, because this does have an ID. So all rates. And I'll make this a little bit wider so it's falling on one line. And the API that we're going to be connecting to is from coinmarketcap.com. So they've got a listing of all of the popular cryptocurrencies and their trading volumes, their rates, percentage of change, and so on. And they've got a really great API that can pull back all of that information. So the API path is ticker, and this returns back all of this wonderful information. So let's set up a URL as well. And we are going to move this to the backend for the requests later on with Node. So once we've set up our all rates, we can set our event trigger for that. And we'll add an event listener for this one. The event that we're going to listen for is a click. And once the button gets clicked, we're going to fire off a function called getAllRates. And then let's set up the function as well. So getAllRates. And we're not passing any parameters in there, and close that off. And within this function, we wanted to use fetch in order to make our AJAX request. So let's add in fetch. And first parameter is we need a URL. And then, because it's promise based, so we've got thens whenever that promise gets delivered. We're going to be returning back that response information, so response data. And then we have an option of what we want to do with this response data, and to pass it on to the next promise is we return it as then. So when we've got our response data, then we're returning it back and we're outputting it as JSON data. So fetch has a built-in method that allows you to convert your content into JSON data. So what's happening here is that once we get content, so once fetch connects to the URL and we get something back, all we're doing over here is we're returning it as JSON content. So we need to have another promise here in order to grab that content. And this is going to be the JSON formatted content. And then we'll just output that in the console for now. So let's try that out. So console log data, and this should allow us to connect to the URL and return back in the console all of that data. So let's go ahead and click it. And as you can see, there's a ton of information that gets returned back. We're returning back 100 cryptocurrencies with their US dollar price, their rank, their symbol, their name, their ID. And we're going to make use of all of this data that we're pulling back within our HTML page. And I'll also show you how to do this on the back end as well, so that we can create a bunch of routes. And from our front end, we can connect to those routes to pull back that same information and make use of it. So all of that is coming up in the upcoming lessons. And before we finish off, I also wanted to add in a catch. So it's always good practice to have catch in case there's any errors with your fetch. So we just return back as an error. And then what we can do is we can make use of it within our JavaScript code, but for now, let's just console log that out. And we'll do a JSON stringify, whatever that error response is. So we're going to respond back and stringify our error response. So if we do have any errors with this, we'll see that as well within the console. So let's refresh, try it out so everything is working properly, and we're ready to move on to the next step, and that's to continue to build this out, loop through all of the content, and then make some use of that content within our HTML. So all of that is coming up.